Hello everybody and welcome to the Strategy and Social Deduction collection of previews for AwSHUX 2021 Autumn. So if you're new to this, let me tell you, this is not a shut up and sit down review. That's the important part. It may look like it. I'm sat at my table. There's a game. But no. This is not a judgment or opinion. We have not played any of these games. Instead, this is just us previewing games on behalf of publishers because a lot of publishers still can't make it out to conventions. So we're doing it on the internet. How's that for innovation? And oh boy, have we got one heck of a game to start this series of previews with. This is Beast, designed by Elon and Aaron Middle, with art by a whole bunch of people, I think, because it's not listed on Board Game Geek yet, which is a shame because I really wanted to shout out the artists because look at this game. It's gorgeous. We've got this dark Scandinavian fantasy that it reminds me a little bit of The Witcher, but a little bit more stylized and spooky. And what we've got here is my personal favourite kind of game, maybe, I think, don't hold me to that. This is an all versus one game, where one player will take on a horrific and terrifying beast straight out of the wilderness, and a whole team of other significantly less powerful players are going to be hunters trying to stop the beast from travelling around the map and gobbling up settlers. Now, if the beast gobbles up enough settlers, which are the little meeples you'll see in towns around the board, then they win. But if the hunters manage to stop that from happening for just long enough, or if they just straight up kill the beast, then the team of hunter players wins. But of course, I'm doing my best to make this sound simple. There's a whole lot going on here, so let's get stuck in. But just before I start teaching you the rules and how it all plays, I should mention that this is not a finished production copy of the game. I think a lot of these components are placeholder, although a lot of the art is final, which is excellent because it's very, very good. So we have a little bit of a drafting card game here, a little bit of hidden movement. I'll just sort of start talking about how a round works. So this is what the game looks like set up. As you can see, we've got components everywhere except for this southeastern corner. That's because I've set up a 3-player game with 2 hunters and 1 beast player. And when you do that, when you have a player count that's that small, which is the minimum unless you have 1 player controlling 2 hunters, you're not going to use some of the board. But for the rest of the board, as you can see, it's absolutely covered in farm animals who are almost certainly going to get eaten by the beast. I should also mention here as well, in addition to different hunters that people can play, all of whom get their own cards and special abilities, you have a whole variety of beasts to play. And for this setup, I have chosen Hogbad because, I mean, how could I not choose to play a literal feral hog? So Hogbad's token is in the middle of the map here, but actually Hogbad has done a bit of movement. We've got a movement track here, and with some cards that are known only to the beast to show directions that Hogbad has moved. So if you've played a hidden movement game, you'll know a bit about how this works. This token doesn't show where Hogbad is, it shows Hogbad's last known location. I think I'm gonna get something about saying the word Hogbad over and over again is throwing me off. But basically, the hunters know that this is where Hogbad last was, but Hogbad is maybe there, maybe 1, maybe 2 spaces away. So they need to find Hogbad before they can start inflicting damage. So let's talk a little bit about how a round structure works. So a round, which is 1 day, starts with a draft. And you're going to take, there's so many decks of cards. You're going to take this action card deck, and then you're going to take a number of cards for each player to draft. And if you've not played a drafting game, the way that that works is each player will look at these action cards and then pick one that they want or one that they want to deny to their opponents. They'll put that down, and then the remainder of the cards will be passed clockwise. So everyone takes a card from the hand they got, then passes the hand on. And what players are doing here, this is interesting because if you've played drafting games before, you'll know that this is a combination of thinking, well, what do I want? But also, what do I not want to give to my opponents? But of course, this being an all versus one game has an interesting wrinkle here because most of the players are thinking, what do I want to deny the beast? But also, what do I want to pass on to my colleagues? You know, if I've taken a good movement card, I should definitely make sure that other good movement cards get passed on around the table. You're trying to pass good things to your team. That's very, very cool. So once you've all drafted some cards, which, I mean, for the sake of argument, let's just use the action cards that we've got here. You're going to add them to the cards that are unique to your character, as well as any items or beast talents that you've been able to collect. And then you move into I believe the day phase. The draft is dawn, then you're playing cards in the day. And this is where the meat of the game is. So players are limited on what they can do on their turn. They can only play one card with one of these orange symbols and one card with one of these blue symbols. And oh my goodness, there's a wealth of different things that these cards can do to relate to movement or attacking or building. Let's start with the very, very basics. If the beast wants to move, they're going to do so by taking movement cards from their deck and adding it to their sort of movement track here, keeping track of where they have moved related to the tile that is on the board. However, if the beast was to attack, like let's imagine Hogbad's movement cards had taken them to where this town is, they could instead on their turn play a card to attack. And if they do that, they immediately reveal where they are. So you would clear all of the movement cards in the track there, and then you would simply place the Hogbad token in town. And then Hogbad would start doing damage to the people that live there, which is good because in addition to Hogbad needing to kill people in order to win the game, when Hogbad kills, well, I keep saying Hogbad, I should just say the beast because I'll go less insane. When the beast kills things, like all of these farm animals covering the board, the beast can collect grudge tokens, and I love this. This is just a small bit of theme, but the idea that the thing that powers all of your special abilities for both the hunters and the beast is just grudges, it's just hatred for one another. That's lovely. So as the beast runs around gobbling things up, the beast will collect grudges and become more powerful. These grudge tokens will, in addition to letting the beast use more powerful abilities, the beast can purchase beast talents. Now, there's two sort of mirrored decks here. The hunters can collect hunter items, and the beasts can collect beast talents. And what's interesting about these cards is they're the only cards in the game that carry over from round to round. So, ordinarily the structure of beasts is that, you do this draft and then you'll go around the table with, on my turn, maybe I'll play this and this, and then this person will play this and this. Players can also pass if they're holding less cards than at least one other person at the table. But then once you've all spent your cards, then you move into night, which is basically kind of a reset phase where players can see what contracts they fulfilled, which can give them special abilities if they manage to achieve certain things during the day. And it's also where players can buy upgrades if they've collected enough grudge tokens. So there's something like a miniature role-playing game baked into Beast with players leveling up, because you can not only unlock your character and Beast-specific upgrades, you can also collect items or talents from these two respective decks for the two different sides. And here's what I really like about Beast. That's the whole game. When I sat down this morning and set up all of these components, I was like, oh my god, this rulebook's going to take me ages to learn. It's not true. I learned it really quite quickly because the round structure is just really straightforward. Every round starts with a draft, and then players take turns to play all the cards they've got, some of which are unique and some of which are action cards. Then you move into this sort of end phase where players can buy upgrades and you sort of reset tracks, and then you move into the next round. That's the game. And then all of these components are just in service of providing you with cool things. For example, hunters can build watchtowers, which enable them to find tracks that they otherwise have to search for, showing them which direction the beast went. This stack of tokens here are what's used if the beast has an ability which lets them change the biome, because that's another part of this game. Certain beast abilities can only happen in certain areas, like if you're the feral hog, you're going to be comfortable in a forest, less comfortable if you're splashing around in a swamp. And these biome tokens are also used by the hunters when the hunters deploy traps. I really love traps. There's an item here we've got in the shop called a Shrieker Trap, and when that's deployed by a hero, they're going to pick which zone they're going to put it in, but also which biome type that goes in. So let's imagine that a player sets a Shrieker Trap in a swamp in this area. Then the beast knows that one of the biome types in this particular quadrant of the board is trapped, but they don't know which one, and so perhaps that's going to cause them to leave that area entirely. They don't want to risk that because they don't know what trap it is or where it is. Another fun thing in this game that is just spilling over with fun things, Hogbad here can create miniature warhogs. In fact, most of the monsters have the ability to create sort of little minions, and by birthing or corralling or summoning or calling little warhogs, then you've got suddenly little minions that can run around the board, gobbling up more nobles and sheeps and pigs, which is going to get you more grudge tokens. I am absolutely hyped to play this game. I think this is fascinating. It's no secret that the classic sort of all versus one hidden movement horror game, Fury of Dracula, if you play it these days, can feel a little bit clunky and complicated and fussy, and it sometimes creates game states that just straight up aren't fun. long-term Fury of Dracula fans will know the power of Dracula going and hiding in like Malta or Sicily or somewhere and then just sitting there. There are ways to play that game, intentionally or unintentionally, that aren't fun. I'm not going to say that Beast is here to usurp Fury of Dracula's crown, because I haven't played it. But what I will say is that this is a game similarly full of fun stuff, with a similar high concept of a team of players hunting down and trying to kill a fantasy dangerous monster, but one with much simpler rules and with a foundation that feels just a little more straightforward. As I said, I haven't played this game, but I am very, very excited to try it. It feels innovative and fresh, and I mean, who doesn't want to play a feral hog running around gobbling up pigs? Terrific stuff. Let's see what the next game is. Up next, we are looking at City of the Great Machine, published by Crowd Games and designed by German Tikomirov. And we have quite the thematic treat for you here. This is an all versus one game where one player will control a great machine who maybe isn't that great, because in this steampunk setting, they are working on a master plan, as dictated by this doomsday clock, to enslave humanity in service of efficiency and industrialism and other sort of steampunky traits. And then a team of players are going to be playing a kind of hidden movement game. They're going to be these steampunk revolutionaries. They're going to be running around town. They're going to be inciting riots and doing their best to ensure that the Great Machine's great plan doesn't happen. I think there's some really, really cool stuff happening in this game. So what I've set up is it's always a three-player, there are always three revolutionaries and one great machine player, but those three revolutionaries might be controlled by one player or two or three. But we've got the game set up here. We've got the city set up, and you can see a whole bunch of districts, and you can arrange these districts in almost any way you want, so long as each one has at least two entrances, and then every district also has two robot guards, and we've got the three revolutionaries set up in their starting districts, but also the Great Machine has three sinister cyborg servants who are going to be running around town causing headaches for the revolutionaries. But that's fine, that's fair, because the revolutionaries are going to be causing headaches for the city of the Great Machine. I guess it's just the Great Machine. How do you play? What's going on? Quinns, I'm excited to start some riots. Of course you are. It's a great theme for a game. So I'm going to walk you through how just one turn works, the turn structure, and by the end of that, we'll more or less be done with an overview of the game. So every round is going to start with a city event. So in the case of, and this event deck is also the timer, because by the time you get to the end of this deck, the countdown accelerates. But today's event is Join Our Side. At the end of this round only, each hero in a minor district can identify famous citizens, but the master plan advances if there was at least one successful raid during this round. And a lot of the events are like this. They give some direction to both the Great Machine and the revolutionaries, and that encourages both sides to kind of second guess what they think the other side is going to be doing. So we've got our event. Then everyone's going to receive an income of trust, which is the sort of currency, the energy, the resource used by the revolutionaries. And they're going to collect an amount of trust equal to the number of citizens in their district. So you really want to end your turn in places with lots of citizens. But the Great Machine is going to receive a number of bonds, which is 6 at the start of the game. But as discontent rises, which is as the revolutionaries kind of do their revolutionary thing, the Great Machine is going to get more and more bonds every turn, get more powerful. It's all very dramatic. So once you've done that sort of event and income, then you're going to go into my favorite part of the game, which is all of the heroes, all three revolutionaries, deciding where they're going. So at the start of the game, every hero has access to all of these access cards, which are basically cards that show where you're going to be moving this turn, but one of your access cards is burned. The Great Machine doesn't know which it is at the start of the game. So actually, at the start of the game, there's one district all the revolutionaries cannot go. But with that in mind, they're all going to look at all the districts they could be going, and they'll say, okay, this round I'm going to go here. Now, you can play the card of the district you're in, which means you just don't move, or you could move, one away, but you don't want to sprint all the way across town, because that's going to use up all your trust. So the Great Machine knows you're probably not going to have moved far from where you are. But then all the revolutionaries are just going to put their access card down and say, okay, I'm moving here, but they're not going to reveal it. And then you go into the Great Machine's turns. The Great Machine knows you're all moving, but doesn't know where. Now, this is where the Great Machine can spend some or all or none of its bonds doing actions. So a lot of those actions might be movement. It costs 1 bond to move one of these little wooden guards from one district to a neighboring district. And Long story short, these guards, the amount of guards in a district basically just make it harder for heroes to do absolutely anything there. So if you think there's a particularly important district, maybe move some extra guards there. But maybe the heroes thought you were going to do that, so they didn't choose to go into that district because they assumed you were going to move guards there. I love hidden movement games. If you've played Not Alone, by the way, the excellent card game, there were bits of this game that reminded me of that. So you can move guards for just one bond. For 2 bonds, though, you can move servants. And servants can do all kinds of nasty stuff. Now, I'll just point out the special districts to begin with. By taking an action with a servant in Grand Central, the kind of sinister machine headquarters, the Great Machine, where are directives? The Great Machine can draw a directive card, which is kind of a law with a lovely evocative illustration. In this case, I've drawn Resettle, which lets the Great Machine resettle sort of famous citizens around town, and we'll see why that's important in a little bit. And so long as you've got a servant in the Tower of Law, you can take these directives you've drawn and put them into play, and they become permanent laws that are always going to make the revolutionaries' job harder or strengthen the Great Machine. But also, this is maybe what people will find the coolest, by taking an action with a servant in the Control Nexus, you can pick up any of these districts, which are actually in the theme of the game on floating platforms, and move it somewhere else in town, which can be a real headache if any other heroes were trying to get there or move out of there with their access cards this turn. But vitally, you can also use your servants to launch a raid. And launching a raid is expensive. You're going to spend your bonds, and then you're going to place one of these raid tokens in that area with your servant. And what that means is the servant is on the lookout for revolutionaries in that area. Now, more mechanically, what that means is if any of the 3 revolutionaries chose to go to that area this turn, you're going to slap the cuffs on them and arrest them. And that is obviously horrible for the revolutionaries. It's not game ending, but it does enable you to do all kinds of stuff. I'll just explain it now, actually. If you happen to catch a revolutionary who's trying to get into the area and be detained, you can either advance your game-winning Doomsday Clock 1 more space towards the 12 space, which is where you win the game, or you can take all of their trust, which is their resource, and turn it into bonds, which is your resource. Or, and this is kind of my favorite, you can just take their access card. If they played this secret face-down access card saying, okay, I'm going to the Tower of Law, and you busted them entering it, you can just take that access card away from them. And this also loses them their turn. But more excitingly, it means you know that hero can never go back to that district, sort of permanently shrinking their options for the rest of the game. I like that a lot. So let's talk a little bit about what the heroes can do. So going in initiative order, once the Great Machine has taken their turn, the heroes are going to cause some trouble. And every hero's turn is going to start with them flipping their access card face up and revealing where they were going. Now, do you remember that small pool of trust tokens that each hero got at the start of the turn? That trust is first and foremost going to be used for your movement. So if you stayed still, that's great. You're not going to spend any trust. But if you move out of a district, you have to pay that many trust for each functioning guard in that district, which means if you want to cross town, that's 2, 4, 6 or whatever, you can very quickly spend all of your trust. And if you're trying to leave a district and you don't have enough trust, you're going to roll this charming looking escape dice, which has on 4 sides this running away person, which means you managed to escape the district even though you didn't have trust to pay. But if you roll the cuffs, you are detained. And we go through the either increasing the Doomsday Clock, or they take your access card, or they take your trust. But once you've revealed your access card and moved to the district that you were trying to get to and you've paid your trust, then, assuming you haven't been arrested, you can take exactly 1 action. And a lot of these actions you're going to be taking relate to starting the 3 riots that you need to win the game as the revolutionary. So the first things first, you're going to need to increase discontent. You're going to have to, if you choose to do that action, you're going to pay 1 trust for each guard in that district, and then you are going to increase this discontent track, which is inside the Great Machine's track, up by 1. And as you'll see here, you see this woman here, she is an artist, and she represents all artists in the game. What that means is that once the discontent track moves up to that 1 bracket, it means all of these citizens around the town that are artists will join a riot. I love that this game recognizes that artists will riot just because it's in their blood. Then if you increase discontent a little more though, then you can get scientists on your side, and then workers and industrialists, and then finally nobles who eventually realize that, you know what, even though I've won this particular privilege lottery, it's not going to be good for me if the Great Machine enslaves all of mankind. So discontent is the first step towards inciting a riot. The second step, let's imagine that another hero revolutionary was also in that district. They can spend an action, which again costs an amount of trust equal to the number of guards, to peek at what these citizens are. They might be artists, they might be scientists, but also there are a number of traitors hidden around town. And if a riot starts in a district with a traitor, the traitor will actually join the guards in that riot. So that's all bad. Now, at this point, you're realizing, so it costs trust per guard to create discontent. It costs trust per guard to even look at every citizen. This is getting really expensive, so another action heroes can take is just to beat up a guard in their region. They spend an amount of trust of their choice, and then they roll this, what I'm calling a violence dice. And if they roll the number of symbols equal to or less than the number of trust that they spent, they just succeeded at breaking a guard. And not only is that guard useless unless the Great Machine goes and repairs it, which takes them time and resources, it takes up a slot. So that's nice, isn't it? So finally, let's talk a little bit about my favorite action in this game, starting a riot. So if you're in a district, let's just continue imagining that this district's, where all the heroes are. Yeah, let's keep using this example. If you want to start a riot in that district, it might be free. It costs a number of trust equal to how many citizens you have not yet identified. Then you're going to turn them all face up. It's all kicking off. And what you do then is you count up the number of citizens who are going to join a riot based on the discontent track. So if the discontent track is at 3, all citizens of number 3 or lower are going to join the fight. And if the number of rioting citizens is higher than the number of functioning guards plus the number of traitors, then you've successfully rioted in that district and you place a big token that that district can't riot again in this game. So you need to riot in 2 other districts in order to win. But the heroes can do these actions to shuttle citizens that they might need for riots elsewhere to different districts in the game. But then, of course, the Great Machine can pick up those entire districts and move them. There's a lot going on in this game, obviously, but it's not necessarily that complicated. This isn't a super heavy game. It's just full of ideas. More than enough ideas that I would be very excited to try this game and see what it's like to play. Love a bit of heavy movement, love a bit of all versus one, and don't tell anybody, but I can be quite partial to a bit of steampunk as well. So yeah, that is City of the Great Machine, and why don't you and I take a look what the next game is.
This is Dune Betrayal. Every day is great with your Dune-based social deduction game. This is a little box social deduction game that's got some slightly funky stuff going on, and it features all of the characters you know and love from the upcoming film to do with Dune, featuring the bad people who have no hair and are sad, and the good people who have beards but still look like they really don't like your choice of karaoke song. So in this game, you're either going to be of House Harkonnen or House Atreides, and you're going to be trying to sway the battles at the end of the game to your favour. Now, first of all, you've got to work out who you are. And at the start of the game, everyone is going to be given one card that shows them the character they're actually playing as in the game. Maybe you are Mr. Baron Harkonnen himself, or maybe you are that really sexy man from Star Wars, Duke Leto Atreides. It's been a long time since I've been looking at it. I'm looking forward to the film. Hopefully it's not bad. So, the way it works is you get this secret identity, and then after that you're going to be given some cards, right? Everyone's going to get given one card that says House Atreides, one card that says House Harkonnen, and one card that says fighter on it, just saying this agent is a fighter. And then based on the card that you got given, you're going to keep 2 of these. Now, if you got given, for instance, a Harkonnen fighter character, then you would keep these 2 and say that you're going to be House Harkonnen and you are a fighter. You keep both those cards and you keep them face down in front of you, and that would represent who you are. It's pretty simple. The only thing that's a bit weird here is the fact that if you are a noble, then you kind of keep yourself so secret that basically you keep the House Atreides and House Harkonnen cards, which means, ooh, you're powerful, but also mysterious. So these 2 cards go in front of you next to your actual identity card, and they remain secret throughout the whole game, mostly. It's a social deduction game, which means people are going to be trying to guess who you are, yes, but also people are going to be trying to have a little peek here and there using powers and things that trigger during the game. Throughout the game, we're going to have 3 different action rounds and then 2 targeting rounds, which effectively is a big battle at the end to see what happens. In the action round, you're going to be choosing one of the 3 cards currently available in this rolling refilling shop of things. And in addition to these cards giving you these really useful powers, they're also going to give you points, potentially, at the end of the game. Now, this is the funny thing. There's little symbols at the top of these cards, and that means that, hey, if you take this and then it turns out, oh, it's been revealed you're a noble, then you're going to get a point for your house, which means you're going to be trying to pick stuff that's going to help in the current situation and help you at the end of the game. But also, if you keep taking cards that are really obviously like Harkonnen noble cards, then everyone else is going to be like, well, it's Harkonnen noble over there, obviously. Some of these cards are going to let you actually peek at other people's cards, and for example, choose one of their 2 traits, and have a look at it, at which point that card will then be locked, so nobody else can peek at it for the rest of the game. Although, of course, you've literally got mind benders here, which means there are still ways that other people can do it, but generally speaking, that information is only going to be for the eyes of one person. You're going to keep going around in a circle through these 3 different action rounds, taking cards and activating them immediately or just saving them for the battle at the end of the game. And then things get slightly spicy when we get into the targeting round. In the targeting round, everything's going to kick off. Now, people have been playing action cards that will allow you to, for example, show your trait to another player and view theirs, and then shield both of those traits so other people can't see them. Tasty. You can use cards to reject things and interrupt stuff immediately. You can use cards to put assassination tokens on other players, which means at the end of the game, that player is inherently going to get -1 points for their team, or give them a sigil to give them an extra bonus point at the end of the game. So these things are effectively going to be ongoing, and you're going to be getting a bad sense about a player and maybe trying to put some minus tokens on them because you think that they're a bad egg, whilst trying to protect someone else because you think they are a good egg. But crucially, this isn't a game where there's just one baddie. You're potentially all baddies to everyone, and everyone's trying to hide their identity at all times, which is either incredibly exciting or exhausting, depending on the sort of person that you are. And then crucially, what happens in these 2 final rounds is every player gets given 2 target cards, and you have to simply choose in the 2 rounds, what are you going to do? One of these cards is a defend card, and one of these cards is an attack card. And in those 2 rounds, you're going to just basically attack someone and defend someone else. Then you're all going to reveal who you are, and depending on who you are, it's all going to score out. So there's talk of assassination and attacking people and stuff, but in reality, it all boils down to points at the end of the game. There's no player elimination or knockout like in Werewolf. And your identity is going to base how effective you're able to defend the points of your team. For example, if you can get everyone to attack a fighter rather than a noble, fighters will lose points when attacked, but not many. Meanwhile, if everyone piles on the noble of the other side, then really their points are going to go all over the place. And then effectively you just keep moving this back and forth, doing all the stuff until you've finished, and hooray, these people have won. Or, oh no, these people have won. Of course, I mean House Atreides and House Harkonnen. So that is it. That is Dune Betrayal, a game of constantly trying to convince people that you're something you're not, in the hope of getting them to accidentally assassinate their friends. Relatable content. This is The Thing, Infection at Outpost 31 from Mondo Games, and based on the cult hit film The Thing, one of my favourite films ever made. Interestingly, at the time, critical flop. No one liked it. It cost a fortune. Hollywood thought it was rubbish. They were all very wrong. In this game, you are going to be trying to move through this facility to try and get out of the outpost alive and escape on a chopper helicopter. However, initially, you're only going to have access to one part of the facility, Section 1, before moving into Section 2 and Section 3. Now, along the way, there's going to be some pickles you're going to have to deal with, and each of you is going to be playing as a character from the characters from the film. So we've got characters like Clark, Copper, Knowles, Windows, Gary, Norris, Bennings, you name them, they're probably there. Admittedly, it was just about 10 blokes in a cold hut. And then you're going to be trying to work together to solve problems like fires, monsters, rooms being destroyed, and the reality that actually one of you may well be the thing. The real thing was inside of us all along. So, how does it work? Well, first of all, someone is going to be the captain, and that's going to be represented by them having this little gun, and then they're going to be the person who chooses who goes on them with a mission. There's going to be this mission log here, and you're going to flip it over, and things are going to happen. Sometimes bad things are going to happen. And there's going to be power outages in certain rooms. There's going to be certain rooms that are suddenly on fire. That seems bad. Oh, actually, this room, number 3, the kennel, has got a mysterious smoke in it. If we don't go and sort that out, then it's going to turn into a mysterious fire, which is going to mysteriously, probably, burn loads of dogs. Doesn't seem good. Eventually, though, you're going to keep drawing cards until you get a mission that represents something that a team have to work together to try and do. Now, this will require 1 yellow character to go along and 1 green character for some maintenance and some science. If you can bring those types of characters along, then you have to. There's 3 types of character: leaders, basically, maintenance and science. And then effectively the leader is going to choose as many characters as is pointed out on the card. In this case, 4 or 5 players. And then after they've chosen the characters, everyone is going to give them one of the 5 supply cards that they have in their hand. But before we jump into that, I'm just going to point out that, yeah, some of these team amounts are quite large. And that's because this game plays up to 8 players, with 8 characters definitely containing at least 1 or 2 things at that by the end of the game. It's a game of quietly lying and not trusting each other, which is suitable based on the film it's based on. Now, these supply cards that each character has are going to be secret in their hand and do a variety of different things. Generally speaking, they are going to be useful. Things like axes, flashlights, the ability to use a fire extinguisher to put out a fire, or whatever else you want to do with it. I'd probably do that. But effectively, you can spend these cards during these missions to hand a card to the captain, and then that's going to contribute to the number of dice that you can roll, and then you're going to need to roll over a certain number as a team collectively to actually pass the mission and not have everything go pear-shaped. What happens when you pass? Well, you get to flip over one of these little tokens on the board. Each of these square little tokens here has something underneath it. Maybe it's a useful item like a piece of rope. Maybe it's nothing. Maybe it's the thing. Oh, it's a thing. Or maybe it's it's a thing. Yeah, a lot of the stuff in this place is not great. However, as you go on, there is some stuff that is pretty great. Rope, for instance, is fantastic because you can literally use it to tie someone up, which means they're not allowed to do anything for a whole turn, which is useful if you think that they might be an alien. Dynamite is, again, pretty useful. You can just use it to make a dice better or worse immediately at any point. And the flamethrower. The flamethrower is extremely spicy, and the fact that you can do 3 things with it. First of all, you can use it to get +3 rolls for a challenge. Fantastic. You can use it to activate a blood test, where you can specifically point at a player and say, I'd like to test your blood to find out if they're a human, or maybe not as human as they'd like to be. Finally, though, you can use both of the flamethrower's 2 charges to literally just torch another player, to just set fire to someone. Unfortunately, the crucial thing is you only get 2 charges with a flamethrower, which means you can't test their blood and then torch them. If you're going to torch them, then you've just sort of got to go all in and hope for the best. Now, the flamethrower, crucially, is an item that you're not going to find until you get to the 3rd section of the base, so basically the end of the game. So it isn't a game where you can get player elimination, have people knocked out really early in the game. If it's going to happen, it's going to happen when you're almost ready for everyone to get in a helicopter and leave. And really, most of the game comes about when we look back at these supply cards that everyone has. The captain asks everyone who they've brought on the mission for a single card, and it's up to you to give them one, and then they are going to take them all, shuffle them up without looking underneath the table, and then they're going to have the option to basically look at them and take one of these cards out at secret, put it on the bottom of the supply deck, and take another one randomly from the top of the supply deck to see if they can improve their odds of the mission going well. After that, they're going to reveal everything that they have, after again shuffling around on the table, and then effectively you're going to see how it went, and you're going to roll the number of dice that you're allowed to roll. Although, oh no, we do have a sabotage card here. If a sabotage card comes up, that's very bad, and effectively something bad happens immediately, which will often mean that the mission fails. When the mission fails, you don't get to flip over a token, and sometimes things just get dramatically worse. After things keep getting worse and moving on, if you're not careful, then rooms start to set on fire and become destroyed. And if the base becomes destroyed, then you all lose, unless you're the thing. So crucially, as the captain, you've got the chance to look at the hand of cards you've been given and go, oh no, there's a sabotage card in here. Put the sabotage at the bottom of the supply and then draw another card, which hopefully won't be a sabotage card. And then everything will go well. But that is assuming that the captain, at the moment, is not the thing, in which case they might go, oh, I got a terrible card, and put the best card in the bin in the hope of drawing something worse from the supply. And therein lies the rub of the game. Now, initially it suggests that you should be incredibly vague about what you've got and you're not allowed to actually talk about specifics of what's in your hand, but then there's scaling rules for when people understand the mechanics of the game better, in terms of allowing more and more information to be shared with one another until you really are running circles around each other by fictionalizing what's in your hand in the hope of making other players look untrustworthy. Across the board as well, we've got all these different types of missions, we've got tons of different supply cards, we've got this funky little board that basically reminds you of all of the different things in all of the different areas, so you know what stuff you can find and what stuff you're likely to find. And then finally, the blood test cards. Pretty neat in terms of at the start of the game, you're going to get given a card that says either human or imitation, not ideal, but then there is going to come a point later in the game where you're going to have another card, and maybe you started off being human, but now you're not a human anymore, which again, very in keeping with the theming of the game. If you can make it all the way through and get onto the helicopter without anyone being an alien, then the people who aren't aliens win. But there's a whole bunch of ways that the thing can win, most of which you'd expect. Having the building being destroyed, getting onto the helicopter, quids in. Crucially, at the end of the game, you are going to get some blood tests, possibly, depending on how well you've managed to hold it together. This little computer shifts along as bad things happen throughout the game, and if you manage to do quite well and get to the end, then you're going to get to do 3 blood tests at the end. Have 3 characters tested to see if they are human or a thing. Then it moves on to just being 1 blood test, and if you get into the really bad times, then you got none, and you're just going to have to completely guess before hopping onto a helicopter. So good luck with that. And that is the thing. Infection at Outpost 31. Will you all make it away? I don't know. You're going to have to find out, I suppose. This plays between 4 to 8 players, and again, loads of lovely little details in here. Production quality on the cards, the board, super lovely, and yeah, very nice. I think that's the end of the video now. I think another video will come up soon. I guess we just have to sit here and see what happens.
Up next, we have a Game of Thrones Betwixt from Fantasy Flight Games, a game of bluffing and betrayal for fans of games like Coup, Oriflamme, or Vampire the Masquerade Vendetta. Throughout the game, we're going to be using our hand of cards to bid on allies that appear in the middle of the table, with the person who bids the most claiming that ally. But what's interesting about a Game of Thrones Betwixt is that these cards don't just go into your council right in front of you. No. They go in between players. So you're sort of sharing power with the players around the table, trying to pull the strings ever so slightly in your favour. I've got a 4-player game set up here, and we will play a number of rounds based on how many players are in the game. And each round will be made up of a certain number of bids, also depending on how many are in the game. Now, at the start of each bid, what we're going to do is reveal the top card of this ally deck. We've got Mr. David Seaworth up for grabs here, and every player is then going to have the opportunity to play cards one by one into their bid pile. I might play this Pulling the Strings 4. Some of these cards will have abilities that activate instantly, and some will have abilities that will activate once the bid phase is over. Eventually, though, players are going to decide that maybe they've bid enough, at which point they will kneel, signifying this by turning their card to one side, effectively meaning they have passed for the round. Once everyone has knelt, the player with the most of these influence cards is going to be the one that claims this ally. They take the ally and they place it in one of the councils between them, between the player to their left or between them and the player to their right. Regardless of who they pick, they'll also get one of these little power tokens for winning the bid, which will be points at the end of the game. All the cards that were played are then discarded into the centre of the table, the first player marker is passed along, and a new round begins. But when do you get to draw up more of these cards? Well, therein lies Game of Thrones Betwixt's little secret. You're only going to draw up to your full hand of 10 cards at the end of each of the game's seasons, meaning that most of the decisions in this game about when you're going to play your special corruption card that lets you move power around, when you're going to use your contingency plan, early or late in the round. It's all very interesting. So once you've finished the game's 3 seasons, a bunch of these ally cards are going to be sat between players and maybe some points as well, and loads of players are going to have points ready to score. And when this happens, when the end of the game is triggered, we're going to look at each individual player's least powerful council, adding up their points and the points of the lesser of their 2 councils beside them to work out their total score. The player with the strongest lower council is going to win the game, unless, of course, they are tied, at which point the tied players then look at their higher council as well, with whoever has the highest of the 2 winning the game. So that's a really weird twist, but alongside that, there are a bunch of strange, twisty decisions embedded into these cards. They're the meat of the strategy in the game. This Betrayal card, for example, lets you move cards around into your bidding pile, or that contingency plan earlier is a very strong card for a bid, and it comes back to you if you don't lose it. It's also important to mention that these power tokens that you collect have different values on them that aren't revealed to anyone but yourself, so whoever is in the lead is obfuscated at any given time. Now, let's also talk about the advanced game. In the box, you've got a couple of different modules you can try, one of which are these white leader cards that you start with in your hand. These will give you unique powers dependent on which of Westeros's many different leaders you choose to go with that game. You also have these event influence cards, blue cards that get added to the deck at the end of the seasons that really shake up the game. The game is also playable in a shorter version and has 2 distinctly different drafting versions, and you can play it with allies revealed face up, so you can plan your strategy about what's coming next on the conveyor belt. All the game's allies have their own unique, interesting artwork, and the game comes in this perfectly sized little box. So that is a Game of Thrones Betwixt from Fantasy Flight Games. A game for 3 to 6 players, takes about 90 minutes, with lots of cards and spite. So this is Picture Perfect, brought to us by Arcane Wonders, and if I'm honest, this is maybe the strangest of the AwSHUX previews I've done so far. I won't beat around the bush, this game looks like this. In Picture Perfect, players are trying to organise the world's fussiest guests at the world's most crowded dinner party, and at the end of the game, you're going to take a photo of your nicely arranged characters and try and score the most points based on their individual secret needs. At the start of the game, each player gets given a number of these envelopes, and inside each one are a list of that guest's special requirements. So right at the start, you're going to read through all of these and organise your guests as best you can. This is done secretly with the guests facing towards the player, so no one else knows how you're arranging certain people. Once everyone is happy with their current placement of figures, we'll draw one of these exchange cards from the deck in the centre of the table. This one is a Rumours card. These exchange cards will determine how players swap and/or examine each of the envelopes round the table. Rumours has everyone choosing any one envelope, looking at the contents, and then returning it to its original owner, whether that be the centre of the table or one of their fellow players. Once everyone has rearranged their guests and is happy with their placement after seeing this new information, we'll pass the first player card along and then begin another round of arranging, drawing these exchange cards and manipulating the placement of our guests. And after 6 rounds, we'll score based on our final placement. But what exactly is inside each of these envelopes? Well, this lady in yellow here wants a specific set of criteria. She wants to be stood at the table, she wants to be stood in the middle section, and she wants to stand next to this lovely chap over here. And then the game starts to get a bit silly. This houseplant doesn't want to stand next to a man, wants to stand next to that lady in yellow and wants to be in the background. So at the moment we're doing all right if we move this lady here. So you're trying to get as much information as possible and arrange the figures correctly until at the end of the game, you'll take out your phone and literally take a picture of the guests, trying to capture the perfect number to score you plenty of points. And when you're done, you remove the screen and look at your little scoring card over here. In the picture you just took, if the guests are having all of their preferences fulfilled, you'll score 6 points and move up this track over here. You'll score fewer points for the fewer preferences you manage, and if you manage to meet no preferences of a guest, you will lose 3 points. And if that guest isn't included on your board at all, you'll just score nothing for them. So it's better to not place a guest at all rather than risk messing up their specific preferences. Now that seems like a honestly quite hellish logic puzzle, but let's make things a little bit more complicated. Once you're familiar with the game, you can play with the auction exchange cards. This module replaces some of the exchange cards with new auctions, like the single round auction, or a secret auction, or a fixed price auction for the specific envelope that you have listed. But what are you bidding during these auctions? Why, of course, it is your decorations, which at the end of the game are worth a point each. So if you have a crucial piece of the puzzle sat in front of you, you want to charge a high price in these decorations to get a bunch of points for your guests. This game is mad. And that is Picture Perfect, a frankly bonkers game of organising a bunch of dinner guests with these lovely envelopes and a cute dog standing on a stool. It takes about 45 minutes to play, it's suitable for ages 10 plus, and seats 2 to 4 players with their own unique little backgrounds. That's Picture Perfect from Arcane Wonders, and I'm quite excited to play it. In Hit the Silk from Escape Plan board games, players are a bunch of crooks who've just hijacked a plane filled with money, but now they need to split up all that cash between them. Players will need to make sure they have enough money to make that heist worth it, and then get off the plane. But your gang of thieves have quickly realised that there aren't enough parachutes to go round, meaning that you need to find out who your friends are quickly and get out as soon as you can. Players will win the game by having a parachute and enough cash between players who have safely landed once they get off the plane. For a 4-player game, that's $100,000 between as many players as possible. And a turn in Hit the Silk is very simple. All you're going to do is any or all of these 3 things. 2 of these options are nice and simple. Depending on your altitude, you can discard cards to draw new ones from the deck, maybe getting some new spicy options for later on. Your second option is to trade cards with your fellow players, but there's a catch. You don't have to be entirely honest. You could put all your trust in giving your friend Greg a parachute, only for him to return the favour with a bunch of flannels. The final option is where the meat of the game lies, and that's playing any number of these cards with actions on from your hand. Steal cards will let you pinch opponents' stuff, spy cards let you look through their hand. If you have a revolver and a bullet, you can shoot a player, making them permanently lose a card. And briefcases full of cash and parachutes are how you're going to win the game. But let me tell you about some of the stranger cards in this deck. The handcuff cards have you cuffing 2 players together, meaning that if one of them has a parachute and one of them doesn't, they're probably going to become a big meaty pancake. Handcuffs are going to force players to collaborate or die trying, but maybe you can go your own way if someone finds you a key. But a key might also let you into the lockbox that hides some spicy items. Maybe a knife that protects you from theft or one of those spare parachutes. You've also got poison and the antidote to cure it, and if a player is poisoned, they're probably going to die before they even get a chance to hit the ground. But whichever of these special items you use, you're going to slowly tick down the altitude of the plane. And whenever you reach one of these parachute symbols, it's time to vote if you're going to hit the silk. Here, players will take a vote as to whether they want to jump out of the plane or not, and if the vote passes, then any players that landed safely with a parachute and the requisite amount of cash will win the game. Any players left on board, well, they do have one chance to get out. In Hit the Silk's most charming and bizarre touch, any players left on the plane will have a chance to try and safely land it. This is a little mini game where you roll these 2 dice and see how far the plane lands, and if you manage to park it right on that landing strip, then you win too. In the box, there are also rules for an advanced game where you can threaten players with revolvers and handcuff yourselves to a briefcase. And you can also add in double-crossing challenges where lying during an exchange of items might have consequences. And so that is Hit the Silk from Escape Plan Board Games, a 20 to 40 minute game that seats between 3 and 6 players. Light, breezy, simple, and probably quite funny.